Welcome to another English Sparkling with Tweedy video. The weather has taken a decidedly autumnal turn. I didn't really have any English Sparkling in stock, so I went to a shop close to Hampstead Heath. Well, it's actually more of a restaurant really. It's called, is it the London Shell Co or something? A sort of seafood restaurant. A couple at least of English sparkling wines on the shelves and in the fridge, more importantly. And they do takeaway prices. I think I'm probably still paying a bit over the odds for this compared to buying it via any normal route. But, you know, it was an emergency. I had no other way of getting English sparkling at short notice. And it has the benefit that it's chilled. I haven't really had to bring out any chilling apparatus because it's only a 10-minute or so walk off the heath. So I haven't bothered even with that ice jacket. This is Langham's Corallian, a Chardonnay dominant blend. It has some useful information on the back. Well done to Langham. I always like being able to get a little bit of technical information. 70% Chardonnay, 21% Pinot Noir, and the remainder 8% Pinot Meunier. The vintage, it's predominantly 2021, 86% 2021, 14% reserve wines from presumably earlier vintages. Bottled in August 2022 and then disgorged in December 2023. 16 months on the lees, a year and a third. Now, interestingly, it also says 2 grams a litre dosage, which is definitely towards the lower end. That would put it into extra brut category. It's getting close to a brut nature. I think a nature, normally you don't add any dosage at all, but it's definitely at the lower end. So I'm not expecting this to be particularly sweet. It's going to be very dry. So I always say pale gold when it's a sort of classic cuvee. The first thing I'm met by is a surprising amount of creaminess. Somewhere between brioche and, this is Dorset, isn't it? Do they have clotted cream in Dorset? I don't know. And partly perhaps because there was that very big mousse, and that does seem to trap those autolytic characters a bit more. But nice though, I mean, not in a kind of, you know, faulty, weird lactobacillus way. But definitely something quite creamy there. We're now heading into, you know, more predictable territory of apple and citrus type notes. The apple there almost has a very subtly sort of Calvados-y quality to it. It's not straightforward fresh apple, not exactly kind of baked apple either. It has some other expression of Malus domestica and something citrusy in there as well. So those are the sort of things you would expect from a Chardonnay dominant blend. 70%, was it Chardonnay? On the palate, mouth-watering, pretty appley there, with probably a splash of lemon juice on it as well. Definitely apples and lemons again there. Not immediately noticing it being searingly dry, is that even a word? Hugely dry. I don't think I would immediately have guessed that this was a low dosage wine. And partly there's a lot of zing there, a lot of appley, tangy zing. I don't mean this as a criticism because I like cider, but I think it has a kind of cidery quality to it. Put in mind slightly of Breton cider, and that possibly links into what I was saying before about that kind of apple brandy-esque apple expression, Calvados-esque nose. And then on the palate, the texture of the bubbles, it's not quite as sort of classic fine bubbles as you normally get with traditional method sparkling wine. It feels a bit sort of bigger, I suppose, in a way, a little bit more like the bubbles you might get in a slightly sparkling or a keeved, technical term there, cider. I wonder if part of that effect might actually be that low dosage, and that's one way it's manifesting here, is that sort of raw apple zing is really sort of coming to the fore. It might be perhaps tempered a bit had the dosage been slightly higher. And amongst that, there does seem to be a slightly saline, slightly mineral quality there. I have to admit, not currently blown away by that, which is going to sound odd because, like I said, I do like cider and those cidery notes are nice, but I sort of think everything has to be in its right place. If I want cider, I would buy cider. I would pay a lot less than I would for English sparkling. So I wonder if this might partly be a serving temperature issue. Despite having said it's great, I just picked it out the fridge and only carried it for sort of 10 or 20 minutes. Maybe it's warmer today than I think. So ridiculously, I do have the thermometer. I love this thing. See what the temperature there gets down to. I just glanced at it and it said 13. The trouble is I can't show you it and also see it myself. It's again saying 13 there. I really should have brought the ice jacket, if that's as low as it's going to get. Yeah, doesn't seem to want to go much below 13.6. And that is really surprising. It really is. It can't be more than 20 minutes out of the fridge. Maybe that fridge in that restaurant just isn't particularly cold. I don't know, but wow. So, you know, the normal suggested range for sparkling wine is, I don't know, is it 8 to 10? Different people have different opinions, but the consensus that I often see is 8 to 10 degrees. I wonder if, particularly for this specific wine, maybe 13 and a bit is actually beyond the pale. It's certainly not bad, but I feel like this is one that probably really does need to be in that ideal range. It feels a little bit like it's lacking finesse in this state. Just a tiny bit too rustic around the edges. I like rustic when I'm expecting it in, like I say, cider, then it's great. But what I want is sort of sophistication in an English sparkling. It's not quite delivering. To my slight surprise, I think particularly the acidity. I love acidity, and it's one of the great things about English sparkling. It's one of our biggest assets as a style of wine. I feel like it has gone a tiny bit overboard. And I think serving temperature changes your perception of acidity as it does for sweetness. So things that are perhaps a little bit too tart when warmer might seem more palatable when a little bit cooler. I mean, think of lemon sorbet, for example. If you let that melt, you'd probably find it disagreeably tart, and actually a tad more dosage, a little bit more sugar might have helped that. I can't really blame the winemaker for this. I am drinking it at 13, probably now 14 degrees, not really where it should ideally be. What I should do is shut up and take this home, put it in the fridge for a couple of hours, taste it again. Brought the rest of the bottle back home, have put it in the fridge for, it's been in there a good couple of hours now. I think I'm going to open this up. As always, these stoppers can be a little bit violent after the bottle's been shaken around a little bit, so see how this goes. They're not the easiest of things to get off either. Bloody hell. You see what I mean? And then the trouble is then a huge amount of CO2 has just escaped, and quite often that means the wine then goes a little bit flat afterwards. So it's not really ideal as a scheme for enjoying a glass in the woods and then enjoying the rest at home. Reassess the temperature. So what's that saying? 11? Not sure what's going on today. It certainly isn't a hot day. I don't know why. With 2+ hours in the fridge, it's only 11. Really not sure what's going on. Perhaps this is faulty, I don't know. That is slightly nicer now. Hard to know whether it's that extra couple of degrees of chilling, or weirdly, I don't think airing for a sparkling wine is usually considered to be beneficial, but I'm getting a bit more Chardonnay character, and it's got that slightly sort of rich, buttery note to it that you sometimes get from usually aged more than this Chardonnay sparkling wines. And that's quite nice, a little bit of sort of butter, brown sugar, that kind of thing. Less fruit character in a way, but it's replaced with those nice sort of secondary, tertiary notes, butter, brown sugar. That's pretty pleasant actually on the nose. Still a pretty hefty dose of zing, but I'm finding it more manageable now, I think, somehow. It does seem to have developed this, perhaps it's just my imagination, but this sort of slight hint of, like I say, brown sugar, kind of caramelly kind of edge to it. I think that's a lot nicer now. Could just be serving temperature, could be the difference between the earlier inferior outdoors stemware versus proper glass. Much better now. And perhaps there is a little bit of a hint of, I don't know, baked apple or something like that. Buttery note, that brown sugar note, and yet really, really, really intense zing from that, possibly just from that low dosage, I think. It's surprisingly drinkable now. Seems like it was a lot of effort to get to that point, but perhaps the lesson here is serving temperature actually does matter. I think I'm going to stop babbling now. I've probably gone on enough, but cheers.